Welcome to the High Impact Medicine podcast. In each episode of this series, we talk to a medical professional who is pursuing what they consider to be an impactful career alongside or learning from previous clinical practice. Today's conversation is with Nadia Montazeri, who completed her medical school in Bonn, pursued a psychiatry internship in Switzerland, and then held the role of program director at Effective Altruism Switzerland. We discussed the transferable skills she got from her medical training, the intricacies of community building, and the importance of finding a topic area about which you develop shower thoughts. I really enjoyed this conversation, so I hope you do too. Welcome, Nadia.
Thank you, Tanya. Thanks for having me.
So let's just start with you telling us a little bit about your journey from medical school and what got you interested in doing the most good that you can.
I heard about effective altruism when I was in my fourth year of medical school. So I studied in Germany, which is like 6.5 years of medical school, no undergrad or anything that would allow any kind of like exit option or so. You're like in for the ride. And so I heard about it in fourth year, then just like minimally updated my plans from working in surgery and donating somewhere to working in surgery, or urology I actually wanted to do, to donating to particular effective charities and maybe even optimizing by moving to a different country to be able to earn more. And then like half a year later, someone in that local EA chapter at my uni nudged me to go to an EAGX, so the EA Global Conference in the Netherlands. And yeah, at that conference only, I noticed, effective altruism is so much more than donations. And there's all of these new things and all of these ways that I could use my skills differently than in clinical medicine. And yeah, that just kind of led to this. I think a lot of medical students hear about effective altruism have this existential crisis of, I chose this thing because I want to do a lot of good. And now I read this article where someone writes how little good I actually do if I'm a marginal doctor working in clinical medicine, and also probably how replaceable I am. And yeah, that went on for like a few weeks, maybe a month. And then I started to like become more creative and thinking about all the things that I could be doing and how an amazing opportunity that actually is to break out of the very clear-cut path of clinical medicine that most people follow through after university.
Mm-hmm. What kind of skills did you start building? What kind of skills did EA inspire you to start building?
Yeah, so at the time I read the 80,000 Hours Career Guide, and because I was still so far away from graduating, I went for the path of, just like try and build flexible career capital, and wasn't like super directed at any specific cause area. So what I started doing was build more expertise in public speaking. For a year or so, like every time there was any opportunity whatsoever to give a talk, I like forced myself to do it. So yeah, like this, a lot of people are like afraid of that. And I was like, yeah, maybe that's something that I can easily build up some expertise in, or like at least comfort. And so that was one of the things that I did. Another thing is I learned how to code. I did like a summer with training with a MOOC Python, because that seemed like a very flexible career capital and something like a combination that's like rather rare, a doctor who knows how to code. So yeah, that was the kind of flexible career capital that I just built with the thing in mind of like, let's see how I can later on use those skills when I know more about what are my priorities in terms of cost prioritization. And also I was running the local chapter, the Effective Altruism group, shortly after I went to that conference. So some like organizing skills and like the one-on-one skills, like discussion skills, how to update your beliefs, improving your judgment based on like the pieces of evidence that you can just gain from conversations, which is very different, but also like a necessary kind of skill compared to updating views based on existing like evidence from studies and meta-analyses. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what did you do once you finished medical school?
Yeah. So I had moved to Switzerland for the internship year of medical school. One, because the working conditions are a lot better. In Germany, you often just like spend your time drawing 40 blood samples a day. And there I could actually like test my fit for medicine, if that would at least be a good option in case other plans don't work out. And like test out another also healthcare system that was like close enough culturally to what I was used to. And accreditation also in Switzerland is pretty easy for European Union citizens. So yeah, one of the 4 months internship parts that I did was in psychiatry because I found that the most interesting, the colleagues the most, like the nicest actually. And yeah, I found it has at least some transferable skills in terms of behavior change being something that could also be useful if I wanted to do coaching, maybe for researchers, or yeah, one-on-one skills, maybe group therapy as something that's related to presenting. Yeah, it's like a limited scope of transferable skills, but still more so than, for example, surgery or internal medicine, from what I experienced at least.
I think I resonate with that reasoning a lot. Okay, so then another question. What kind of skills did you pick up from medicine that have been useful to you since you left medicine?
Yeah, the one I found most surprising was when we were hiring for an operations coordinator at ES Switzerland, the interviewing. That was like surprisingly fun. Like obviously it's like more relaxed to be on the other side of interviewing. But the kind of, trying to pick up on like subtle cues, and yeah, it's speculating, obviously, because like you have just like very limited information and very limited time of like what you can like get out of that person, but like having a kind of feeling for, oh, I want to go into that kind of thing because I have an intuition about there's more hidden there and I want to get that information out as well. And specifically with psychiatry, I think to be a bit more skeptical about when things don't quite add up. And then, yeah, asking those things to like with a third party patient history, or like in case of hiring, there would be a reference. Yeah, so that's a bit of a parallel, even though obviously with getting a reference, people are usually not as honest as with a third party patient history. But yeah, that was a surprising learning, like takeaway for medicine, that like recruiting.
Very nice. So you spent a year in your role at EA Switzerland, or about a year?
A bit less, 8 months. Yeah.
Okay, and could you tell me a little bit about your role?
Yeah, the role was called program director, so having a focus on like the programming of EA Switzerland, like the outreach strategy. So one would be the impact seminar, which is pretty similar to the Effective Altruism virtual programs that some of the listeners may know about, and then coordinating also the outreach efforts of that, so the university groups, and especially with the university groups, finding and motivating new university organizers, because a lot of university groups struggle with like sustaining the momentum once key organizers leave. And this is also something that happened during COVID at the universities in both Zurich and Lausanne. So one of the things that was a priority was to find new organizers there and support them with like tabling and with starting like an in-person seminar, because there's something really special, I think, about having students together at a university who can easily also like meet for lunches and one-on-ones, and like learn from one another and do their career planning together. Yeah, so that was definitely one part of the job. Another part was to do career one-on-ones. 80,000 hours obviously does that too, and they have like a lot more capacity to do that now. Sometimes it can be particularly helpful to know people in the Swiss community, to connect people to after a one-on-one, because it's like easier to like follow up with them, and it's more of a feeling of a community if you know, oh, that other person in my city also like is interested in air safety or is interested in animal welfare, and getting leads there, and also finding ways to test your fit for things without having to move for that, I think is quite valuable. So that's like one of the really things I really highly value about local community building. Yeah, so these are the two things. And then organizing retreats. Retreats also seem to be really valuable at forming stronger ties between people. And I always also see part of community building as making myself unnecessary, because there are so many great people in the community that can support one another, and that these kind of connections will last longer than any work contract reasonably will. And I saw that with my own career development. I tend to want to discuss that with people that have a lot of context about me, and who I talked to about this like 3 or 4 years ago, and who can remind me of, oh, what about that thing? Have you forgotten about that? Or like, do you recall that this thing really didn't work? Why do you still think about that? You already ruled this option out. yeah, so forming these kind of connections that like help people, not just about career, but also about personal decisions, because it can be really hard to balance that and also to, discuss that with someone who, you only have like a limited amount of trust with yet. Yeah, and that's, retreats can be really valuable to form those and, get connections starting and have just like maybe finding a co-founder for a project that will exist down the line. Yeah.
An interesting question that I'd kind of like to ask is, you said that reading information that is impersonal and general, you kind of use different reasoning strategies versus if you were having one-on-one conversations with people. So what do you think is the value in one-on-one conversations, and how can you make the one-on-one conversations better?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think the distinction that I wanted to make was like between fields where there actually is a lot of reliable data and where the conversation should be about, okay, what is the data that you've seen, the like meta-analysis that you've read that maybe I haven't read or that I interpret differently, which is often the case with questions in medicine, where like the meta-analysis like 99% of the time will trump the anecdata of the individual doctor. And then there's things where we just have no clue about and have to like reason through like the more philosophical parts about effective altruism, the like reasoning about long-termism there. Like I wouldn't know how to conduct a meta-analysis on like, shall we act according to long-termism or not? And also with community building, like we have some, like there is psychological studies and maybe like management wisdom about how to design these sort of things, but you have to like take into account the anec data a lot more than in clinical medicine. And then, for example, a question that I would ask something like, okay, what would someone who, that also actually works for medicine, and I should have asked this to my professors more often. What would someone reasonable and smart and kind who disagrees with you say about this exact question, about like onto this opinion? Because there's like an easy way to get the counter arguments without having to be particularly knowledgeable yourself.
Very good point. Maybe an interesting thing to talk about would be like the little tests that you can do to figure out what your personal fit is for things. What kind of tests have you done, and what kind of tests have you encouraged other people to do as well?
Community building, if you want to test your fit for that, for me, it came very naturally to just be excited about learning about these things and having conversations with other people about it. And finding the like uncertainties and things to test out myself to get more data on both what works in community building and also how much I like it. And then starting to run the local chapter at my university was a very easy thing to do, even though not quite as cheap because it demanded a few hours a week, but it had like several upsides of like learning more about EA, hanging out with cool people, forming friendships with them, and getting better at explaining EA to other people because I had to like train explaining it. And also like about things that I didn't know, like when people asked questions like, I have no idea when actually it makes sense to, that was a conversation I recently had, if there's what are great reasons to say, using expected value calculations for like very, very tiny numbers, are there like reasons to think that this just doesn't make sense from people who have put a lot more thought into this than I have? So running the chapter or just like organizing one project, maybe like an intro talk and doing the outreach for that, that is partly good for testing your fit. But then one thing I underestimated then later on the job was how the university group activity actually also differs from the national group level activity. How I, at least for Switzerland, I model the community building role or like the executive director or program director role more like a foundation that runs programs and does like talent development. And that's similar in the sense that you need to be able to present the ideas around effective altruism well, but it demands quite a bit more managerial skills and things like hiring that usually university chapter leaders don't do, and also engaging with people who are a bit more senior when talking about funding. So that is something where I'm like, maybe just like testing out your fit while working at a foundation or while working in a management position in the nonprofit or for-profit sector might be a good thing to test for. A lot of the times just like being able to like balance a bunch of different things, and doing that full time is like, as compared to next to studying, is a bit different. And there's also some change with regards to community building within EA because there's more funding available, therefore more specialization, and having several people working full-time in different facets of it is now more possible. Whereas like a few years ago, it was all of this like organizing and career coaching and volunteer management and fundraising. So like the common thing is to have like a very deep knowledge about effective altruism to be able to present it, but maybe that also changes given that someone who works in operations maybe doesn't do that much representation.
So this summer you're going to be starting a new role, and could you tell us what excited you about getting this internship?
Yeah. I'm going to be a summer research fellow at the Stanford Existential Risk Initiative. So one thing I noticed was that given that this is such a generalist skills with the feedback loops being oftentimes delayed, because like oftentimes whether you had an influence on someone, like a counterfactual impact on the choices they made to be doing more good, or if it had gone either way, or it had impact whatsoever, that like there is some latency period, and then there's all of those different tasks that you become a bit of a jack of all trades. And that can be like cool, like could imagine enjoying that a lot. But having transitioned out of medicine, I felt like, oh, like given that most of the things that I learned in the last 6 years are a bit useless, I'm more keen onto like exploring more different things and also training a bit more hard skills. And one way to do that is to invest more into learning about which parts about research may I enjoy, or like writing in general, and how can I actually make use of my background given that I studied medicine. So I'm kind of balancing the two options of just like ignoring that I ever studied medicine and trying to find a skill or an aptitude that I could become really good at, or taking into account that I studied medicine and also value the long-term future a lot, looking into biosecurity as a possible cause area that I could work in. And I was trying out some biosecurity things, like trying to read up on it, but all of that next to studying. And so it didn't really spark between me and biosecurity when I've tried to do that in the past. And then I kind of accepted this role because it seemed like a great option in community building, I mean. And so I still felt this kind of, I still want to test that out for sure and dive more deeply into a concrete question. And so this is what I decided to do now. And I'll see how good my fit is and if I want to stay in the like research track or maybe a governance track that actually leverages my background.
Very nice.
Yeah.
What kind of personal goals are you heading into this role with? You said maybe writing, maybe just learning more about the specific field. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I think the learning about the specific field and seeing how much just like gut level excitement I can get about both the field and kind of research work. I think that's the most important thing. Like, I think I heard this on a podcast recently, something like, do I develop shower thoughts about it? That's the thing I'm looking for, actually. That's most of my personal goal, to like really like get sucked into that topic really deeply. And if I get there within like the period of the research fellowship, then I think I reached most of my goals, because I see that like given how motivated I can get about things and how I can then also do things that I find a bit of a drag if I have that foundation. Yeah, I see that as most of like the goal of this. And then also if there's like research that emerges from this that I find that is valuable, that's like amazing. But if I end up doing research, I would expect that to be valuable when I have a lot more experience and not within a like shortish period of time.
I have to ask you a question here. And that's just because it's something that I've been thinking about myself quite a bit over the past few months. Is the level of intrinsic excitement you feel for something actually a good signal as to whether this is something you should be doing? Because for me personally, I also found out about effective altruism last summer, did the fellowship, read the books, and I was like, what am I doing with my career? Why am I studying medicine? But I kind of had to keep studying medicine because you can't just quit. And there's this sort of cognitive dissonance that you have where it's like you need to really study quite hard to pass your exams, whereas your heart isn't really in it. And I started doing a lot of meditation, a lot of relaxation techniques, trying to find equanimity in doing a lot of hard work for something that I wasn't really that passionate about. And I think that the skill that I've developed in doing that has been very valuable. And I think in general, I really admire people who do important work that might be difficult, that might not be that intrinsically interesting, but which is for the greater good. Like, it is quantifiably better. I think maybe my interests have not misguided me throughout my life, but they don't necessarily lead to something that's impactful. Like, I would love to just spend all my free time studying physics. That's what makes me have shower thoughts. That excites me. But it's not a good compass for what has the biggest impact, right? So how do you deal with that? Like,
that's a magnificent question. Thank you so much for this. This is a typical example of, there's a great blog post by Scott Alexander that says, should you always listen to the opposite advice that you're given? And I would love to have that in the show notes. So please skim that first before you listen to this advice that I'm now going to give. I think the default of choosing what to do is to see for like what you're naturally drawn to, right? In that case, in my case, was medicine partly because it's like, oh yeah, I find like cell biology and I don't know, genetics and things like that super interesting. And there would always be a point where I was like, okay, like this gets so deeply into the weeds and like the exams are like so dry that it's no longer really interesting. So like, one, no matter how interesting something may seem at first glance and how much you're drawn to it, like if you actually then need to like pass an exam or start a project around it, there will always be parts that are not super intrinsically motivating. So yes, there's a lot of value to being able to do tasks that are not intrinsically motivating and to finding, like building that skill of doing hard work. I definitely agree with that. And when I was studying for my state exam, and that was 2 years ago, a bit more, there was a 3 months period in which all I did was studying for this exam, knowing I'm not going to work in clinical medicine. Most of this knowledge is utterly useless for what I will end up doing, even though I didn't know what exactly what I'll be doing is. And I also found that experience valuable in terms of, okay, this is how, if really necessary, I can motivate myself for a limited amount of time, which was also like a mantra that I had in my head. Like, this is a self-limiting problem, just like, you know, a cough when you have a cold. It's a self-limiting disease. But at least for my like motivation, that was like super important. And so I learned, okay, I'm not going to be happy in a kind of role where it might just be 5 or 10 years of me doing something I don't find intrinsically motivating, or where I have to like set up all of these systems of like, okay, I need a reward in the evening each day, like to hang out with friends, or to, actually just like design something when I plan my week that like makes sure that I find this rewarding. Like, that's also work to set up rewards and plan all of that out. So yeah, that is not something that I can sustain for my career. And I do see it as a marathon and not a sprint. So then on the other hand, looking at the world and seeing these are the things that are plausibly the most impactful, and like putting myself into tight contact with that topic or that skill that I would need to learn for it. And then see that if there develops some kind of spark by that exposure and by being led a little bit by what actually develops the spark, and then checking in with other people if what develops the spark is actually impactful or not, and having people who are like really honest about it and giving the feedback, this thing that you want to analyze there, or like the kind of model that you want to train, you might want to really train that model, but it's not going to be valuable. That's also super important. Yeah. So I think that's my 2 cents on this.
Yes, I mean, I was speaking about this with another medic the other day, and he said that he's finished med school, and now he doesn't need to meditate every day and exercise every day and sleep so that he doesn't have mental health problems. He's just happier because he just really finds the work that he does interesting.
Yeah, I find that very relatable.
There's definitely a point there that the career is a marathon. And I think for people that are unsure about what to do, investing effort into building the meta skills that you mentioned earlier, maybe public speaking, I think writing, expressing yourself is a very important one. Yeah, those are all very valuable things. Is there anything you would like to share with listeners?
I think there's one more addition to the last question we talk about with finding the spark kind of thing, which is one thing is the cause area spark, which in my case would be kind of the biosecurity, which is like a whole field in itself, right? I might find one particular niche within biosecurity that is one of the most impactful things to do. Super exciting. And then the other thing is skills and aptitudes. And probably listeners have heard about the aptitudes framework from Holden Karnofsky. And there, like with this cluster of skills or an aptitude, I think there the spark is a lot more important than with the cause area. Because there it's like, okay, how do you leverage what you already have into having a big impact? And just like my hunch is that at the crossover or like the Venn diagram overlap between super impactful cause area and someone's aptitude and just like finding the thing that they can excel at, that's where like a lot of magic will happen. And yeah, obviously you need like a lot of other people who like correct for your biases for what you're like intrinsically super excited about to like guide your strategy in a reasonable way. But that's kind of the model that I have, where like the importance of shower thoughts come in, like direct your shower thoughts into something that is impactful.
Yeah. I mean, maybe one more question.
Yeah.
What do you think work-life balance should be, right? Because if you are super passionate about something, you have to make sacrifices. There's no way around it. If you want to reach mastery, if you want to excel, or if you want to make a really big impact, you have to make trade-offs.
Yeah.
How have you kind of approached this in your life?
Yeah, that's a great question that I'm still also trying to figure out. I think there's like some key things that for me shouldn't suffer, and they're just like, I think the most important thing, and I feel like everyone has heard it already, is to not compare yourself to other people, but like to your past self, or like the best versions of yourself that you've experienced so far, to like set realistic standards and develop yourself from there, and see like gathering data on what you need. And there's like this bulk of evidence of like, like mindfulness is a good thing. Sleeping is like a really, really high priority. And looking at you, night shifts, you suck. Yeah, that like getting those basics ready and like learning your personal, I can compromise on sleep for like 2 nights, but then I really need to make up for that. And having a kind of protocol for this for me is useful. And then with like personal life and hobbies, one thing I learned rather recently was, because I didn't really track my work hours that much, but like my motivation over the week would kind of go down to like start working in the morning, that I'm so much more productive and also happy, because then I have the energy in the evening to do things that are refreshing, to leave my desk before I feel like I have no motivation to work anymore. So I had this like belief in my head of, it's like 6 or 6:30, but I still can do this thing, so I should do this thing. And now I'm like, no, I want to wrap up now and I can do that tomorrow. It's fine to leave my desk when I have some energy left for other things.
I think we should have another conversation about all of these things. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, Nadia.
Thank you so much for having me. I also really love talking to you, Tanya.